Hello, it's Ashley. This video today is going to be all about Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens. I will be sharing techniques, tips, paper comparisons, and recommendations, and demonstrating throughout. These pens are a water-based pen, great for coloring in stamped images and creating watercolored backgrounds. The more unique thing about these pens is that they have a real bristle brush tip. The brush comes to a nice fine point to allow you to color in tiny images, or you can lay the brush down to cover a larger surface area. I'm going to demonstrate the different ways these pens look and react on different paper types because there are some major differences and paper selection is very important when using these pens. First, I'm using Bristol Smooth paper. This ink goes on so smooth and even and doesn't feather out or bleed through to the other side of the paper. This is a nice thick paper, so it can withstand a lot of color being applied. It's an excellent paper for these pens. Next is the watercolor paper. The ink goes on very smooth as well. Since it's a watercolor paper, it's meant to be able to handle a lot of color and water, which is another fantastic choice to use when coloring with these pens. The next is a very thin sketch paper. Since these pens are water-based, this paper wants to ripple up when I'm coloring. It also does not go on very evenly compared to the first two papers. The final paper type is a basic 65-pound cardstock. When coloring on this cardstock, I find it very hard to get smooth, even coverage. There are streaks of color, and when I go over it with a water brush, it doesn't blend out. And I find that the fibers in the cardstock start to almost break down and pill up. And just a side note, I am using this water brush out of convenience and ease. You can easily use traditional paint brushes and water to do all these techniques as well. So this is the thinner sketch paper. It isn't made to handle water and it just doesn't blend well either. These pens blend effortlessly on the watercolor paper. A technique I don't go over in this video but could be done very easily is just the opposite. So starting with water painted over your image and then applying color on top, it creates a more subtle color. As you can see, the inks blend effortlessly on the watercolor paper with the watercolor brush, just as well on the Bristol Smooth here. There's no streaks or harsh lines. The ink glides and moves around on the paper very well. So you can see in these comparisons how the Bristol Smooth is really nice and the sketch is not so nice. Again, the Bristol Smooth is nice and the basic cardstock is not so nice. And again, with the watercolor and the sketch. So this next comparison I wanted to show you with all four papers is coloring just the edge of the flower petal, then drawing the ink in with my water brush. I love this technique for creating depth and dimension. With the Bristol Smooth and the watercolor papers, it blends so easily and without any harsh lines. When it comes to the sketch and the cardstock, they do not blend well at all. Most of the ink stays put where it was laid down, and if you continue to add water and try to blend it out, it will just break down that paper again. So now you can start to understand why paper selection is very important with these pens. These pens are quite an investment. They are on the pricier end of coloring utensils. So it's important to pick a paper that will work very well with them. So these two are just not good choices when coloring with these pens. For the rest of this video, we will say goodbye to these two papers, and I will only be demonstrating with the Bristol Smooth and the watercolor papers. So now we'll get into some fun techniques to use with these pens. This first gradient technique is a lot of fun because it's easy and the results look amazing. I am putting the brush tip into some clean water for a couple of seconds and then starting to color with a fluid kind of up and down stroke while moving left or right, just depending on if you're left or right-handed. I should mention I am not a painting or coloring expert, but this technique produces high quality results and is pretty error-proof. What's happening is the ink on the brush tip has been drawn into the water. When you start coloring, the ink is slowly working its way back into the brush tip, giving a really cool ombre or gradient look. On the Bristol Smooth paper, I really get a crisp result. On the watercolor paper, it's more of a natural look since the paper is more textured. For this next technique, I am using two similar color shades and blending them together. I started with the darker color, then slightly overlapped the lighter color to mesh the two shades together. It's easy then to switch between the two shades to blend and build color until your desired result's achieved. I use this technique a lot on some of my stamped images when I don't feel like adding water or don't want that watercolor look. So as you can see, these last two techniques produce very similar looks, but in two totally different ways. And that's part of the fun with these pens. For this next technique, I'm using an acrylic block. You could also use a painting palette. I'm transferring ink directly onto the block, then using a thicker water brush to create a soft traditional watercolor look. This is great for creating backgrounds on your images. You can also combine several colors on your palette or block to create new colors if you do not have a full set of these pens or choose just to buy a couple here and there. And it's really easy to just wipe up off of your acrylic block. Next, I'm back at the flower petals to create a one pen color tone on tone look. You can let each layer of color dry, then go back over it with that same color to build the color in certain areas, creating more shading or more depth. So if you only have a handful of these pens, this is a great technique that you can utilize to get more use out of your pens. For the next petal, I'm using two pens in similar shades, one a little bit lighter, one a little bit darker, turquoise. Starting with the lighter color and then going over certain parts with the darker color. You will find a lot of coordinating shades in this product line. This also just gives it some depth and dimension in a different way. This is a great technique to use for different brown shades to use for like hair or clothing where there's creases. The next technique I'm using is a one pen color and then using my water brush to fade out that color. I use this technique a lot when I'm coloring in stamped images. As you can see, a little bit goes a long way with this. That's why I love this technique. You get a lot of use out of that little bit of pigment. You can see I'm going like 1.5 inches and I could keep going longer if I wanted to. And the results are so smooth. I love how it looks on that watercolor paper. It looks very natural. And then on the Bristol Smooth, it just looks really smooth and clean and crisp. This next technique, I'm using a clear Wink of Stella pen to blend out the color instead of a water brush. It's a lot of fun using this because it adds sparkle. The Wink of Stella brushes don't put out a ton of liquid, so that's one nice thing about this technique is your color is still going to stay very vibrant, and the Wink of Stella brush tip cleans up real easy with just some swipes on a paper towel when you're all done. And it's all clean. I have the 90 count set, which is a lot of colors. You don't need that many. I just chose to get that many as this was a gift. I wanted to show you that there are even some bold and bright fluorescent colors. These two kind of remind me of highlighters. There's also some amazing gray shades in this set with both warm and cool tones. It's kind of nice. A lot of colors have warm and cool tones and they say it right on there, so you know. These are great for adding slight color and dimension to images you want to mainly stay white. Think like ice, snow, polar bears, snowmen. I've been using these a lot lately as I've been starting to make winter and Christmas cards. They blend out beautifully too. I don't show it in this video, but there's also a lot of brown shades too for hair. There's a couple different flesh and kind of blush tones for skin too when creating images that are little people or animals. These just blend so smoothly. I've been so impressed with these pens. So next I wanted to talk about storage. I store my pens in this hard plastic Deflecto brand container. I found this at my local Hobby Lobby store. You could also find them on Amazon. There's a removable 4-way divider inside. I leave it in place. This particular container is stackable and can sit vertically or on its side. These pens are also able to be stored vertically or horizontally. I store mine vertically. I've had them for almost a year and they are still in the same condition as when I got them. No broken bristles or drying out, nothing. The color tab on the bottom is usually pretty true to the actual colors, but some are a little off. I do wish they made a color tab for the cap. I made some DIY ones with a hole punch of the color sample. I adhered it with some multimedia matte from Ranger and then put glossy accents on the top. I wanted to conclude this video by showing some cards that I made using my pens. This first card is a good example of using these pens to color in super tiny images. The next card is a watercolor water base, and the octopus or octopi were colored using Bristol Smooth. I like the combo of both in one card to get different looks. The watercolor is more natural, faded, and the octopus are a little bit brighter. This next card I just wanted to show off the beautiful looks you can achieve with the grays. I also colored the seaweed and shells with the pens. There are some really natural looking colors too in this set. The flamingo is a great example of the flawless blending and fading look you can achieve using a water brush. This next card is a good example of coloring in images without using a water pen to get a clean, crisp, vibrant look. Here's a look at some of the more bold pink and magenta colors. I colored the rainbows and did not blend them with a water brush. The unicorn and clouds I did blend out. It's fun to see both techniques in one card. This card has several different techniques in it too. These pens are an investment but well worth it. I would say I grab these over my Copics very often because I find them easier to blend without mistakes. I've really enjoyed using these pens over the past year and will continue to use them in the future often. Please feel free to ask me any questions you may have in the comment section, and thank you for watching this video.